This morning, Keir Starmer, along with 55 other Commonwealth leaders, signed a communique that will force the United Kingdom into formal conversations regarding slavery reparations. It said, and I quote, "The time has come for a meaningful, truthful and respectful conversation towards forging a common future based on equity." Now, Starmer's ruled out cash compensation, but forgive me if I'm sceptical. He's already developed a habit for backflips, and in addition, there are plenty of ways of delivering non-cash compensation that would still leave the United Kingdom shortchanged, like loan forgiveness, for example. But the cash is almost beside the point. The point is, this was an opportunity for a British leader to get up on the world stage and proudly and unequivocally defend his country's history and its values, and he crumbled. Instead, he curled up into the default position of the modern left, which is to express shame and guilt for our past. This is what he should have done. He should have taken that communique, ripped it up, and instead politely requested a thank you to the United Kingdom from the members of the Commonwealth. Thank you for ending the slave trade and paying astronomical amounts of money to do so. Thank you for delivering the rule of law and democracy. Thank you for raising living standards. Thank you for quantum leaps forward in education and health. Thank you for protecting the rights of women. Thank you for bringing civilisation to uncivilised corners of the globe. And you know what? We will not even send you a bill for it. Slavery was abhorrent, but the British Empire, on balance, was a force for tremendous good. And I'm sick and tired of our leaders not standing behind that self-evident truth.
Well, hang on, I have to let JJ have a bite of the cherry because JJ winced when you said that.
Just you saying about bringing civilisation to uncivilised parts or corners. With respect, I know you're Australian, but I'm sure there's lots of the world you haven't seen. And for an Australian to come here and tell us about our British history and how they civilised everywhere that was uncivilised, plenty of places in this world may not meet the same level of civilisation that you think is civilised, but they are still fine and happy places. I don't think it's anyone's right, and it's our right as British people and to protect everyone's freedoms for every other country to live as they wish to be lived. That's what I take umbrage with.
Yeah, this when I say civilised, number one, raised quality of life. We raised living standards.
We also killed
life expectancy.
We also killed plenty.
But this is the problem with this debate, in that we don't look at it as a cost-benefit analysis. We either say someone was entirely good or entirely bad. We need to say that, of course, there were terrible things in our past, but on balance, the benefits that the British Empire brought to the world,
from our perspective.
From the perspective of objective metrics like life expectancy, like education levels, like literacy levels, like health standards. These are all objective things we measure. How
much obesity do we have in the Western world? Do you think that's a good health standard?
Well, I'm probably going to blame the Americans as a but
reparations, listen, I'm not saying we should have reparations or not. I'm not really fussed either way. But Italy paid reparations to countries. After World War II, lots of the loser countries had to pay reparations that are still being paid by some countries now. Yeah. USA got paid reparations from Italy. Yeah. Well, why is that OK? But then for us to say, well, no, everyone else who wants it, we're not going to give it. We're not going to give it.
Reparations were paid to people who were directly affected by the wrong. This is reparations being paid to people who have no connection to slave trade.
In 2022, Italy was still paying $5 billion in reparations to Libya. People who were around for when the 3 decades when Libya was occupied by Italy were not still around.
Well, Eunice, can I ask you a question? Because there was once upon a time a Persian empire, right? Do you think actually the Iranians would entertain the idea that they should pay some form of reparations to the countries that they colonised?
No, not at all, because, and this is where I disagree with you, my friend, because at what point do we stop? Every single country in the world at one point was conquered by another. Okay, so am I owed reparations from the Arabs because they conquered the old Persia? Or, you know, should the Romans pay reparations to the British? So on and so forth. So I just think, like, this idea, like, how far are we going to go back in history? And as my friend said over there, the British Empire was a net positive for the world, OK? Overall, they kick-started world trade. They
invaded many countries.
They globalised science and, you know...
Science existed before the British Empire. Look, we can go way back before that.
I think we're missing the point here, because I think it depends whose viewpoint we're taking about whether we decide if the British Empire was a net positive or negative. But I think the point here is that the British actually paid out an awful lot of money to end slavery. Now, you might argue that they had to pay that to the slave owners, but that's what they had to do to end slavery. They put our soldiers in the way of boats. They died. Lives were were lost stopping
1,600,
slavery.
yeah.
So, and now we are so far down the line. What am I paying for? I'm paying for the sins of people I didn't even know if we give reparations.
But then,
and who am I
JJ, as well,
paying it
though,
to?
like that, you yourself would be paying your taxes over to people who you've never met, never encountered, never had anything to do with. You know, you weren't a slave owner or anything like that.
Yeah.
How the hell would you make it equitable?
Yeah, I don't, and this is why I say I don't think that I'm not in support of reparations, my friend. I'm not saying we should. I'm not saying we should pay reparations, but I'm saying for people to call for it, I think there should be a discussion. I don't think it's abhorrent that Keir Starmer won't come out and say we're definitely not going to do it. I think it's a conversation to be had. And
well, hang on. Who thinks that Starmer should have said, "I ain't signing the communique"? Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is
So you think the conversation should be had at a Commonwealth level?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. And if we want to keep the Commonwealth together, which I'm sure we all do...
We'll get on to that. But Renee, what was the point you were going to make there?
So I just think that we have to leave this in the past now and accept that we played our part in it and then we played our part in stopping it, and it's time to go forward. And actually, I think if you were going to give, and there are estimates of it being £17 trillion, the reparation bill, if you're going to give that much of our money away to other people, we'll need a referendum.
But you know what I would
sure.
say is I think they can, the leaders of especially Caribbean nations can smell that there's blood in the water.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is Starmer giving up the Chagos Islands has made us look entirely weak, and having a foreign secretary who has made these kind of sound bites in the past around these issues, they think, well, easy money.
Yeah, they know that instinctively in the DNA of the Labor Party they want to do this. It is all part of this wider narrative to have shame on our history and to be inherently dismissive of Western civilization.
It's also divisive. If you look in places like California, where they decided to give anyone who could prove they had some ancestry that was enslaved $1 million. What does that do? It divides a community. Everybody's then scrabbling around in, Ancestry.com trying to find someone who was possibly a
Which
slave.
always reminds me of the Elizabeth Warren, a senator in the US, findings. She said she was related to the Native Americans.
Pocahontas.
And Trump called her Pocahontas, and it turns out she had 0.00000 something.
I actually have more Native American in me than her. I have 1% Native American. I don't have DNA
This is the point, and when we start getting into these very ugly conversations about percentages of ethnicity, it leads us down a very dark path that I don't think we want to go down.
All right, well, let's continue down that dark path, because I am going to be quite controversial in this, but hear me out, because Rob has just messaged in. Rob says, Darren, Starmer is more interested in the world stage than the United Kingdom and has gone power mad. Now, I think that's the issue here. The world stage. Why do we talk so often about needing a seat at the table? I'd quite like my table to be a bit damn better and comfortable in this country. Should we not be focusing on that instead? Do you ever get the feeling, my friends, that talking about the Commonwealth and the UN, it could be a whole load of them, the Commonwealth itself, once a symbol of shared history, I think it's now just a line of leaders with rattling begging bowls saying, actually, Britain owes us some pennies. We're told that we're responsible for all the world's ills, as Will has outlined, and surprise, surprise, it's our money that's the solution. But if this is all the Commonwealth has become, right, to talk about these issues, or to talk about King Charles's penchant for net zero and all these other things that are going to make us colder and poorer, then is it time to ask ourselves, are these still partnerships worth holding on to? As the PM and the Foreign Secretary rub shoulders in Samoa, some of these leaders are demanding those reparations for wrongs that took place hundreds of years ago. I tell you, my friends, my granddad was down in mine when he was a kid. Should I ask for reparations for that as a form of slavery? My ancestors died actually down pits. Clearly, there is a sense that there is blood in the water, and Starmer is a weak, lame duck. They just forget Britain didn't just leave footprints. We left common law, we left railways, we left ports, we respected education institutions. And it's funny how these assets still in use today are totally sidelined and ignored. We need to talk about each of these institutions that see Britain as a cash cow. The UN, the Commonwealth. I could go on and on and on. Don't get me started on Davos and the World Economic Forum. They see Britain as the ultimate cash cow. So I say maybe it's time to cut them loose. Loyalty is a two-way street, and right now it feels like we're the only ones paying the toll. I'm absolutely sick. The UN, the ECHR, the Commonwealth, the EU, Britain's soft power, superpower. We need to actually focus on these things. A seat at the table. You sound like you've swallowed Lord Mandelson. We've got our own issues here. Let's deal with them, eh?
Darren, here's my challenge with this. There's the practical side of things as to whether the Commonwealth is really valuable anymore, and I think we can all agree it's of relatively limited use. But there's a deeper meaning behind the Commonwealth that reflects British and Commonwealth history, and it's that modern incarnation of our history that I feel if you just rip it away, it's just another thing that we're slowly tearing down.
Listen, the only thing I feel sad about is that it was very dear to our late Queen's heart, and that makes me feel sad. But I think, actually, I can't think of a single thing that the Commonwealth doesn't strive to better democracy, for example, and all these other things. If you look across some nations in the Commonwealth, you can't argue that they are open, free and not corrupt.
But I would
There is a
argue
lot
that
of
nor are
corruption.
we anymore.
Well, I mean, you could argue to a certain extent. I'm talking pilfering from the state in certain countries. That's why, actually, they say, oh, well, Britain left us poor. No, actually, I'm afraid in many cases, a lot of your own leaders have left you poor.
You see, I think, thinking about the history, the Commonwealth actually is a beautiful example of how we came after the war and we got into a situation where Britain was being accused all of the time of being this great coloniser who did all of these bad things. And I think the Queen, who brought this all together, demonstrated actually that we are one of the most open and forgiving societies in the world, and we brought together countries that would never be teammates at the table, really, from all races, all different cultures. And I think the Commonwealth, from that perspective, is something that we should be proud of. And I think my gut says, Darren, that we should keep it. That doesn't mean we should just bend over any time one of them says, oh, we need reparations. But I do think the Commonwealth is a force for good, and I really enjoy the Commonwealth Games.
I think, again, we're looking at it from our eyes as British citizens. I wonder in the Commonwealth countries how they view us. Because if being part of the Commonwealth, it really should mean that if you are from India, for example, you should be able to get a visa to come to this country to study, to work with relative ease.
Why should it mean that?
Because part of the Commonwealth essentially is just an extension of this country.
Well, I'm sorry, that backs up my argument of why we should leave. I don't think we should do that at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure it should.
India have billions, over 1 billion people living in it.
Listen, I understand what you're saying. I'm just literally putting forward the point of, if you look at the same way as, let's say, take North America. If you're American or Canadian, there's a tie within those that you can pretty much travel freely between the two. The Commonwealth is an extension of this country. We cannot have it. We look at it from our perspective, and we're saying Britain's done great for all these countries. What are they doing for us? Well, if you think that from our perspective, how do people who are on the other side of the coin look at us? Because it's not just a case of down to us to decide whether they say the Commonwealth.
Go to India tomorrow and work without a visa. Or...
No, absolutely, you can get a visa. However. But we can get visas relatively easy to go to India and go to any Commonwealth countries. The Commonwealth countries, many of the member states, cannot come to this country as easy as we can go to theirs. That's factual.
So can any of you, you're all big fans of the Commonwealth. Can any of you list all member states of the Commonwealth?
Oh, I'm not a fan of the Commonwealth. I think it should be pulled apart.
But you said it's an extension of ourselves, right? But we know nothing about this institution.
But what I'm saying is, Darren, for people like Renee who support the Commonwealth, think it's great, we should keep it. I'm saying, well, OK, but the Commonwealth is what it's supposed to be, is an extension of this country.
Because next year, it's Ghana's turn, I think, to be the Secretary-General of the Commonwealth, of the institution itself. And guess what? They're in favour of reparations. So this debate is going to go on and on and on. And Starmer gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And I think we suffer as a consequence. And I'm telling you right now, the British people will not stand for it. They will see this as a naked attempt to fleece the nation. And I worry that all of these institutions are doing that. The ECHR telling us we can't have border policies. The UN telling us that actually, we don't have a right to defend ourselves from so-called human rights abuses.
Yeah.
Darren, I don't think this is a problem with the Commonwealth as much as how we're approaching the Commonwealth under a weak leader at the moment. This could actually be a wonderful vehicle for soft power for the UK if they said, right, we are the natural leader of the Commonwealth. Let's actually get this group of 56 member countries together, get them on the same page and be a viable alternative
that not a new form of colonialism, would you argue, JG? As in saying Britain is the natural leader of the Commonwealth? They'd argue that's outdated, wouldn't they?
No, I don't think so, because essentially now what you'd have is leaders in those countries. It's not a case of Britain making a rule and those people having to just go along with it. There's leaders in those countries who can now stand up and say, no, we don't agree with that, we're not doing it. We're not going to have your judges tell us our rules anymore.
True. All right, OK, well...